What's up, everybody? I just recently came across this meme where you see this beautiful fish spout and the counterexample next to it of our raining drain pipes with the meme saying, "At what point do we stop appreciating beauty?" And that really struck a chord with me. I'm not even sure if this is real, right? This could also be AI generated image of a fish. But the sentiment that this meme evokes in me is real. So in this video, I want to make a case against form follows functions, or at least look critically into when form follows functions is not an effective principle for industrial design, and why it could be important for us to remember to make things beautiful beyond simple utility. And I feel like this really speaks for like a feeling that many of us feel like they carry. We like evolve with modernism and postmodernism into this world where everything is just stripped off and super minimalist, clean, with no character. And there was another meme that I found then online where they showed like these different modernist and modern architecture pieces and compare them to like the ones that we had many years before, right? With really beautiful work, like built in such a fantastic way that they just inspire awe. So I think I'm not the only one who has the similar feeling that resonates with these memes. Make it seem as if reality just stripped away all the beautiful things to substitute them by things that are just functional and cheap, but also bland and a little bit sad if you have only things like that in your environment and surrounding, right? So where does this principle come from? Form follows function. It is attributed to Louis Sullivan, an architect, wrote himself that form ever follows function, and this is the law. And he tried to apply this idea that he found in previous works of other architects, from the ancient Greeks even, to the ones that were just before him, and applied to architecture. So what does form follows function mean actually? So it's a principle in design and architecture associated with the late 19th and early 20th century, which basically states that the appearance and structure of an object or building should primarily relate to its intended function or purpose, or basically that the function of something dictates the appearance of it. So there's no unuseful properties and features with an object except the ones that you actually need. I think obviously we came to a point where we have so many examples where we see that it works, that it functions, that it makes sense, where it's really helpful and has a positive impact on the design language. It makes things more affordable and cheap, right? You can make things on scale much more easily if you apply this principle. And also just in terms of the science, we already learned about processing fluency, right? Which means that the energy intensive visual processing of our brain can reduce its energy requirements by looking at things that are fluent and easy to process, that don't take a lot of effort. And these things are preferred by the brain because of the energy investments, right? So only even looking at these mechanisms in our own brain, we can understand why functional things that are very simple also work for us and are liked, feel aesthetically pleasing as well. So they are stripped down, clearly purposeful forms. They feel good to look at. So this is functionalism, right? It's all about the function. It's reduced to its essence. On a side note, I want to mention that even though Sullivan is the architect this principle is attributed to, his own buildings contradict the slogan, because he was famous for using actually ornaments to take like an entire building and make it a whole, like to use these big functional structures, but to use ornaments in order to weave things together into a whole. So he's not at all against like all sorts of ornamentation. That is mostly attributed to late modernist trends in Bauhaus with architects like Gropius, where even like the last bits of decoration were stripped of architecture and objects. I also already talked in other videos about the aesthetic usability effect by Kurosu and Kashimura in 1995, right? Which basically identified that people's perceived ease of use with an object is correlated with the attractiveness of an object, more so than with the actual ease of use, right? So that means that people believe that things that look beautiful work also better than things that don't look beautiful. So just by adding another layer into this appearance and aesthetic of an object, we can also improve the perceived functionality of an object, right? So that by itself already feels to me like a very strong counter argument against pure form follows function logic. Or maybe it integrates into a principle, right? By adding layers of beauty and aesthetic, ornamentation and details, and refinement, we can also enhance the functionality any further, so it's not becoming useless ornamentation. And I think I have some examples here generated with AI, but still I think they make the point quite well. Looking at like a bottle that's very functional, it has a lid, it's simple and clean, and we have a bottle that feels like or looks like somebody had to put in much more effort. So I'd rather drink from the bottle that is beautiful as well. So looking back at our meme, people believe that the fish gargoyle would work better than the simple pipe, right? It would create more trust, feel more crafted, just because it's beautiful and independent of it drains the water in any different way than the plain pipe. And then going back to complexity, right? Complexity signalizes effort. Somebody had to put like a lot of effort into the things that look very complex, because to this day, complex means that it costs more money to create, right? If you have a CNC milled object and like a very simple cylinder or like a very decorated, ornamented cylinder, it takes way longer, so it also costs more money. Same goes with injection molding. All these cavities and stuff like that. It's much more difficult to create handcrafted objects. They take years of training of people and therefore symbolize like effort and perceived skill that is inherent in the object, even once the whole process is being finished, right? So for a long time, also in research, it was believed that people prefer moderate complexity, right? So too little complexity would be boring and they would not be stimulated at all, which would be good for processing fluency, but would be boring after some time. And too much complexity would be overwhelming and too exhausting for the brain and visual processing. But there was another study in 2021, but it came to a new conclusion that the biggest impact for why complex designs would be appreciated was not the complexity or the processing fluency, but instead it was the producer effort and skill perception. So people don't like ornate objects despite the extra cognitive load, but they like them because the visible complexity signals that somebody with a lot of skill and training deliberately invested effort into the creation of this object. So that's a completely different mechanism and understanding of an object, right? At the moment, the mainstream is still purely working in the bubble of functionalism, right? Which is comfortable and fluent, easy to process, minimalistic, clean. Then we have the aesthetic usability effect, which taught us that by adding beauty, adding a layer of beauty onto an object, we also instill more trust and have a better perception of use of an object. And then we learned that another study replication showed that by signaling effort, the admiration for the skill is also being triggered in the user, and therefore further appreciation can be achieved. If you look at the original meme again, I feel like we can identify that it is functioning, but it also is aesthetically pleasing, at least for some of us. Maybe it's not the taste of everybody, but I feel like I can trust that this works as a spout despite its appearance, or especially because of it. And it looks like somebody had to put like meaningful effort into the creation of this whole thing. But I think there's something more to it. It's not just complex, right? I feel like there's a symbolism that is carried alongside. It's a fish, not by chance, because we have water that is being moving, right? And fish are so fundamentally related to water that I feel this layer does add a lot of value as well. So it's instead of a fish moving through water, we have water moving through a fish. So I think this inverse symbolism is the actual reason that I can appreciate the spout on the left side much more than the spout on the right side. All right, this was a short one today. I hope I was able to trigger some new thoughts, new perspectives when we think about and talk about form follows function. Is it an ultimate principle, or can we find ways to enhance, build on top of it, or even find new ways to express functionality and create visual aesthetic value? If you liked it, follow, like, and subscribe for more. Have a nice day. Bye bye.